Hey, it's Greg. This is the Square Pizza Pod, cooked up by Shermco.
Okay. Dr. Donnell Butler. Good morning, sir.
Hello, hello.
Good to see you. Welcome to the
Good to
Square
be
Pizza
here. How
Pod.
you doing? Hey,
Better
happy to
now
be
that
on the
you're
pod.
here. Better now that you're here. What's going on? Where you? Tell the people where you're coming from today.
So I am coming from my home office in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania. What's the good word in Lancaster? What's going on up there?
You know what? It's starting to be Christmas season, so we get a lot of
Hmm.
tourists who come to town to enjoy the everything from the Amish country to the vibrancy of our city, and usually walk away with lots of like trinkets and gifts and things like whoopie pies and stroopies
Hmm.
to bring to their family members for the holidays.
It's great.
It's a different world for me. Like I grew up in the South Bronx, so
That's what I thought.
like
That's what I thought.
I've grown accustomed to being here now.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that later on because I think it's a really interesting story. And I don't maybe I should know by now since we know each other a little bit if you're a football guy, but your Philadelphia Eagles, your Pennsylvania team has a pretty good football team this year.
Yeah, every once in a while, I've got some friends who are super Eagle fans, and they will send me videos of Saquon Barkley doing amazing things,
Yep.
and I'm like, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I do not have time to watch any of it. I limit my. I could get really distracted. I used to be a super sports fan and be in all sort of fantasy leagues. Now I just
Oh
have
yeah.
too much work to do, so I've
Yeah.
limited my sports fandom to winter is Premier League soccer
Okay.
and summer is Major League Baseball. And I dabble a little bit in the NBA, largely because my dad's a huge NBA fan, and I used to be a huge NBA fan. And a lot of my friends are football fans, so I dabble a little bit, but never get enough time to just watch a whole game anymore.
I love those boundaries. Those are good boundaries. Are you
Well, I
so
got to set
I,
them to get the work done.
I know you grew up in the Bronx, but are
Yeah.
you Yankees Mets guy or are you a Phillies guy?
Oh, that is a story in and of itself. But I'll give you a quick version of it.
Okay.
I met my biological father when I was around 10 or 11,
Okay.
and he was a Yankees fan. And because I had a little bit of a beef, him not at that point regularly being in my life, I immediately determined that I was a Mets fan. But it
Hmm.
turned out to work out in my favor because I became a Mets fan in 1984, which turned out to be a very unique year for the Mets,
Well,
in which a couple of folks got called up from the minor leagues, Dal Strawberry
yep.
and Dwight Doc Gooden, and I got in on the ground floor of something great.
Good for you. Smart, smart, smart. Um, I know you mentioned obviously being from New York. We're going to start with a little trivia for today's podcast. There's a
Hey.
famous New Yorker's birthday today
Ooh.
that actually has a song about it. Do you happen to know whose birthday it is today?
I mean, I know a lot of New Yorkers who have songs about New York, everyone from Jay-Z to Sinatra, but like, tell me who.
Yeah, Sean Carter, Jay-Z has
Yeah.
today's birthday has his own like December 4th song. Was listening to it coming in on the ride here this morning.
I wonder what he's doing to celebrate his birthday. Like, I imagine that he and Beyonce either throw big parties or they just like chill. And I'd love to see what chill looks like for them. Are they watching Netflix movies, those like holiday rom-coms? Like, I'm just curious what goes on the behind the scenes in a couple like that.
Be fun if I like was able to surprise you and I was like, he's on the Square Pizza Pod today to join you
Yes.
for his, but that's not happening. So it's a thought. It's a thought. And then maybe last thing before we start. So I think you're pretty well connected to President and Dr. Dan Lugo from Queen's University,
Oh,
who was
yes.
also previously on the
Hmm.
podcast many moons ago. So curious if you could share how you and Dr. Lugo know each other.
So we spent some time together at Franklin and Marshall College,
Okay.
where he was heading up essentially what a lot of people call enrollment management, sort of admissions and financial aid. And I was overseeing planning and analysis of student outcomes, this kind of like what I would almost call like czar position across the functions of admissions, student affairs, and academic affairs. And that's where we begin our journey as co-conspirators in creating great opportunities for young people. So yeah, I have much love for Dan Lugo and try to connect with him every time I'm in Charlotte.
Yeah, that's great. Small world,
Yeah,
small
ain't it?
country.
Ain't it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. And it's a good segue because we want to spend most of today talking about Opportunity College slash Prelude, which we'll get to. You're unique in a number of ways, but at least for Square Pizza Pod, have like really deep experience in higher ed, and then I think went
Mm,
to kind of launch what we'll talk about later. I think to innovate and support
yeah,
kids around and outside higher ed. Be
yeah.
curious if you could kind of start a little bit from the beginning. Just tell us like some of the roles that you led while in higher ed, and also just like a few things you saw within the higher education space during your time there.
Yeah. So in some ways, it might be helpful to understand how I even ended up in higher ed because it kind of drives
Sure.
all of my work.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, as you know, I'm originally from the South Bronx, and growing up in Section 8 housing, my retired grandmother, like money was tight, and so as soon as I turned 14, I went and got my working papers, and I had
Mm,
started working part-time jobs and summer jobs in like fast food, manual labor jobs, um, and for me, it was all about. I had two jobs, school and work. And so I was a smart kid and I had a lot of hustle, but I wasn't really thinking that much about the future in the way that I think a lot of young people either don't do, or if you've got wealth and the right resources, you're thinking about it all the time. And for me, there was a moment that sort of changed everything for me. I had a summer internship. I earned a summer internship with Citibank at age
mm.
17. And
Wow.
that opened my eyes to a set of possibilities that I had never really even imagined. Um, in I got the sort of wisdom and support from my boss, who was amazing. I got to interact with coworkers who I would never have interacted with, considering where I was from. And I got to do work that allowed me to like change my expectations about what I could do, how far I could go. And so the reason why I was able to work in higher ed is because that put me on a pathway to becoming the first in my family to actually earn a bachelor's degree. And I
Congrats.
began my career at EY in the business world, where I discovered that my true calling was basically education and social impact work because I had a lot of nonprofit clients when I was working at EY that I just fell in love with. And eventually I decided to just pursue that vocation. And I went to Princeton University. That's where I got my PhD in sociology. And since then, I've spent my career just researching and implementing different types of programs that improve college and career success, particularly for, like, I was doing it, I always do it for all students in mind, but I have this universal design mindset where it's like, if I can make this work for students who are like I was, from under resourced, underserved communities, if I can do it that way, then it can work for everybody. And so during my 7 years as a dean of Franklin and Marshall College, I was able to help lead some really important initiatives that dramatically increased both our enrollment and graduation rates for students of color, for Pell Grant recipients. And that like is was the sort of primer for being in that environment allowed me to do some great work but to also see some challenges.
Sure.
um even in elite institutions that have a lot of resources, there are far too many talented students who end up stopping out of college.
Mm,
Family member, abuela gets sick and I got to go home, Dean Butler. I got to take care of my family. My dad lost his job. I got to go home. But I'll be back next semester. Next semester turns into next year. Next
another,
year
yeah,
turns into never.
yep.
And I was seeing these young people leave with no degree, lot of college credits, but like if you got college credits and no degree, you basically got debt. You don't have any certificates or professional credentials. They weren't able to get like really good living wage jobs. They were getting these jobs like they were working at Foot Locker or whatever, like jobs that they would have gotten had they just gone to work straight out of high school.
Yep.
And it got me thinking about the fact that there are these continued sort of inequities in higher education when you come from backgrounds like I do. And it convinced me that we needed some type of a new model for embedding career connected learning, the kind of experiences that I had, into the
Hmm.
student experience. If not in college, then in high school, ideally in both. And then, you know my story. And in 2019, I basically said, you know what? I want to figure this out. I was still young enough and naive enough. I've since lost all my hair. I'm going gray. Clearly,
You're pulling it off. You're pulling it off.
yeah. I just tried to
Well,
build
let me ask
this
the
new
question if
model.
I
Go
could,
ahead,
even before we get there, and that's really
do it.
helpful. And I don't want to assume, but let me assume for a minute since we're friends and
Yeah.
3 million people are watching this live stream. But I got
Mhm.
to imagine that the going from the Bronx to Lancaster, PA for college was maybe a culture shock. Maybe those two communities aren't the exact same. So curious, like if you could share maybe what you saw and how you maybe coped with that, or maybe cope's too strong of a word, but just like
Yeah.
kind of dealt with that potential change in environment.
You know, I had some lucky breaks during my younger years. So when I was in New York City in the public school system, I was sort of plucked out of PS 132. One of my science teachers noticed something in me and said, "You should apply for this program. It's called Prefer Prep." And so I applied for this program, and Prefer Prep is this sort of amazing program that sort of identifies talented young people in the public school systems and prepares them and places them into private schools. And I had a chance to go to a private school where they paid my tuition. All I had to do essentially was pay for books and bring my own lunch to school and all that kind of stuff. So I had like a different experience than many of the students in my high school. But between the part-time jobs and the summer jobs, I was able to pay for my books. And like, because I had this sort of free tuition and was in this environment with lots of other people from different backgrounds who had resources, going off to an elite liberal arts college like a Franklin and Marshall
Mm,
wasn't that big of a culture shock for me. What was a culture shock was the community.
mm.
So when I arrived in 1991, Lancaster, for all intents and purposes, was primarily farmland.
Sure.
There was a city, but it was one of those cities where people were like, "Ooh, the city's dangerous. You can't go in the city." And I'm like, "I'm from the Bronx. What are y'all talking
Yeah,
about?" I'd
that's
go into the
right.
city and I'd be like, "There's nothing dangerous about this at all. I don't know
Yeah,
what you all are afraid of."
right.
And I still feel that way to this day when I like hear people in the county talk about, "Ooh, Lancaster is so dangerous," and I'm like, "Yeah, I just don't know."
Yeah, right. That's right.
But other than that, no, I mean, it was like,
Okay, cool.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No, it's great. That's helpful. And now, yeah. So it's fast forward. You went to Franklin Marshall, I believe, graduated, went back to work, which is cool.
yeah.
And then you, from what you saw, um, then began to, I think, launch and lead Opportunity College. And so, definitely want to talk more about that. And then the transition to kind of the strategy and the transition to Prelude. So,
Mhm.
yeah, take us back to 2019, 2020. Like you're running it, and then catch us up.
I mean, in some ways, I think a lot of people, um, especially when I think about the sort of the new name change, people think, oh, you're doing something different, and not really. Like, so our mission when we launched in 2021, when we launched Opportunity College, our mission then and has remained to accelerate young people into purpose-filled lives that lead to economic freedom. Right?
Hmm.
That's always been the work. And between 2021 and 2023, we piloted 7 different program models to try to identify where we could have the greatest impact in pursuing that mission. And through those pilots, we were able to develop and refine what is our current flagship learn and earn internship program model. It became pretty clear after that we were past the proof of concept stage. We were working with a program model that was proving to be a very effective for our students as well as our
Hmm.
school and corporate partners. And it was time. It was time for a new name to sort of reflect that, which
Mm.
we reached out to our students and got our students to give us feedback on the name.
Cool.
And that's kind of what drove it. And it was time to create materials. Like, we didn't really brand. We had these 3 employer partners that were amazing. And like we were like, we need to get more employer partners. We need to But like, how do we do that? The way we got the three we got was a lot of like word of mouth and just grinding, like, but not like advertising. We didn't like go out seeking them. Many of them found us.
Hmm.
And so it was like, how can we better describe and demonstrate our work to folks? Because to really do this work well, we can't do it alone. We're going to need a lot of other collaborators, not just companies offering internships, which we'll get to in a minute, like what we do,
Yeah.
but schools building out these sort of amazing career connected learning programs in collaboration with businesses in their schools, having nonprofit organizations and intermediaries be part of providing the supports that students need. Like, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's going to take a lot of us together collaborating to make that happen, to create that systematic change, where the transformational experience that I had in that internship that launched my upward mobility is not an exception to the rule, but is the norm. That's the work we started on, the work we're still doing at Prelude.
Yeah. Yeah. Now break it down for people if you could, like
Yeah.
for the fifth grader that's listening out there, help them understand at a simplistic level who you're partnering with, who you're supporting, and how the
Yeah.
model works.
All right. So we partner with leading companies and
Okay.
schools to design and deliver high quality work-based learning experiences. For example, paid internships.
Yep.
And again, the goal is to accelerate talented students into purpose-filled lives that lead to economic freedom.
And we're talking high
And
schools or colleges?
yeah, so we can do this work. So right now we do this work in high schools.
In high
We
schools.
work
Okay,
with
cool.
16 to 18-year-olds.
Great.
The weird thing about it is, I shouldn't say weird, the flexible thing about it is this model can be adapted very easily to work with, because of all the pilots we ran, we can work
Hmm.
this model into a community college, right? So we
Hmm.
could work with 18 to 22-year-olds. Like, there's lots of different ways to do it, but we have found a sweet spot and just a lot of fun working with high school students and helping companies begin to realize how they could basically build and cultivate local talent, both for their companies and for their communities, and use sort of high school internships as a way to foster their own employee engagement and create professional development opportunities, oftentimes for emerging managers who need to be able to develop their managerial skills. And we provide support for our companies to do that as well.
And the high school students are getting paid during this internship, is
Oh
that correct?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, good.
So, so our
It's gonna be
company
awkward if you
partners,
said no, but I thought
yep,
so. I thought so.
our company partners provide year-long paid internships where the high school students will work anywhere between 6 to 10 hours weekly, usually in high trajectory career pathways. So HR to finance, marketing to IT, other similar operational functions. And at the same time, the students also, in addition to that paid internship, they're taking a year-long seminar course that's aligned to the internship experience that enhances their workplace readiness and career building capabilities.
And I know it might be too soon, maybe not, but curious, like, I'm 16, 17, 18. I kind of run through the core part of the program. Some of those jobs might be ready for me after 18, or I might
Right,
need to get higher ed. Curious,
right.
like, what does placement look like either into college or straight into jobs?
It really depends on the employer and the way the
Okay.
program is set up. For most of our employers, their jobs that are sort of the real entry level jobs that they are hungry to build talent for is after college. But one of the reasons why they'll work with us, not just because of the professional development opportunities I mentioned that emerging managers get, but it helps them early build that pipeline,
Sure.
right? Because if you think about it, in a lot of ways, if you're competing in your city with talent that's potentially going to other companies, and a lot of that talent, especially in a lot of the cities where we operate, is actually coming from outside the city, like people moving from one place to the city that that the business is operating in. You begin to realize that it's really costly to recruit
Hmm.
in that way. But if you can start working with young people who are 16, 17, 18 in the community where you already operate and get them enthusiastic and excited, not just about your company, but about the community and the opportunities in that community, and create a mindset for them like the one that I got, where it's like there's
Hmm.
so many things you could do. How far you can go is really up to you. And at that point, those folks then go off into college and will continue to do college internships at our employer partner.
Cool. That makes
Or
sense.
in some cases, we've had students where we've worked with them and they've already said, you know what, I don't necessarily want to work at this place doing those things, but I want to come back home. Like
Mhm.
one of the things that we found exciting about this, or at least I should say I found really exciting about this, is the potential for reducing brain drain in certain
Hmm.
communities where you lose really talented young people who think there's not
Yeah.
opportunity in their community. And if we can create more of these opportunities for young folks, we don't lose that talent anymore.
Yep. And keep breaking it down. The schools and the employers you're working with, they're in Lancaster, they're in New York, they're all
Mhm.
over. Where are you guys
Yeah, yeah,
serving?
yeah. So the 5 cities that we operate in, our biggest cities are Newark, New Jersey, Camden,
Hmm.
New Jersey, Charlotte, North Carolina. We also do some work in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as well as Culver City, Los Angeles, California.
Okay.
One of the things that we like to focus on is communities in which there's a lot of resources and opportunity, but economic mobility hasn't necessarily been heightened.
Hmm.
Rod Chetty did that study a while back around economic mobility and ranked various cities. And the cities that we tend to have the most enthusiasm for are those cities where there are great corporate partners, there are lots of big businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, lots of opportunity, lots of growth happening, but it's not necessarily always hitting in the neighborhoods and in the communities where we have the potential to waste talent and not take
Yep.
advantage of that. That's where we want to grow this work because we know if we can do it there, we can do it anywhere.
Yep. And speaking of Charlotte, bias, since it's where the business is located and where we've been. Curious, for like from all the communities you've seen and just like your own experience, what jumps out to you, good or bad, as you've kind of jumped in and grown your work in Charlotte from what you've seen in our community?
Oh man. So um and I should give some credit. We talked a little bit earlier about Dan Lugo, who's the president of Queen's University of Charlotte.
Yep.
Um, and Dan and I served on a national board together. And I remember having a conversation with him where he's listening to what I'm working on. And he's like, you got to come to Charlotte. And I'm like, I don't have a reason to come to Charlotte. I can't just come to Charlotte. We don't operate in that way. And I'm still not sure like what the right next set of employer partners I need to get. I want to grow with quality. I don't just want to grow for growth's sake. It's really important that the students have a good experience, the schools have a good experience. So I need the right employer partners. And while we were having that conversation, the universe was doing its own work. And
Mm.
my colleagues were having conversations because a group of folks at the early career talent team at Wells Fargo National reached out saying they heard about our work and they wanted to see what we were doing. They had a chance to see what we were doing in Newark, New Jersey. And they said, we should try to do something together. And so I remember reaching out to Dan about like several months later going, so I'm going to be visiting Charlotte with some folks from Wells Fargo and maybe we'll do something together. And as I begin to explore, because even on that first visit with the Wells Fargo team, as we begin our partnership with great guy, Principal Eric Turner at Central Piedmont, and I begin to realize Charlotte presents both this like urgent challenge, but this extraordinary opportunity. So we were
Mm.
talking earlier about the Rod Chetty stuff.
Yep.
Not too long ago, Charlotte was actually ranked last among the metropolitan areas
Yep.
in that study. And there's like this unprecedented alignment of resources I noticed in Charlotte to
Mm.
change that reality. And there's already been gains because in the latest study that Raj did, the mobility rankings have gone up,
Yep.
right? And I have no doubt from everything I've seen and observed that the Queen City will not rest until it's like best in class. And why I believe that is because I watched how the education and employment ecosystem was working and building in Charlotte. everything from initiatives like Charlotte Works, Road to Hire, the Carolina Youth Coalition, everybody doing all this important work was essentially supported by and in alignment with this robust corporate presence that's deeply committed to education and workforce development. You got the Charlotte Executive Leadership Council, the work they were doing with the Charlotte Mecklenburg schools around those loaned executives and residence programs. Like that's a model for other cities to follow. And
Mm.
so to have an opportunity for Wells Fargo to invite us in to bring this program model to their company and to the city of Charlotte, it's like this is this vibrant community where we can contribute what we're learning, learn from others. We know that Wells Fargo has this commitment to growing the next generation of leaders. We know that we've got this committed, strong leader in Principal Turner and the
Mhm.
team at Central Piedmont Early College, and seeing intermediaries like the ones I mentioned before, and the work great that you and all are doing at Shermco. It's like these optimal conditions for demonstrating what's possible when a community is galvanized to build better college and career pathways for young people.
Well, that's beautiful. Well said. Thanks for the love. And I agree. And know we have a long way to go as well. But glad you're in town and glad you're bringing some of the brilliance and work you guys are doing. On the flip side, if I pushed you from what you've seen
Yeah.
from other communities, what could Charlotte do better that you've seen other communities do that we're not there
Mm.
yet?
One of the things, and I'm no expert in Charlotte, but when I talk to folks on the ground, one of the things I hear them concerned about is issues related to keeping young people engaged in schools,
Mm.
that the attendance rates are not where they want them to be,
Yep.
that the truancy rates are kind of high. Um, and I, I don't think I'm Pollyannish about this. I think that having more career connected learning opportunities in schools can help young people begin to see that there is a pathway forward for them. There
Sure.
is opportunity for them, that going to school actually has a value. Because I've talked to enough young people to know that some of them are convinced they don't need school. Some of them are convinced that they can just go on the internet and learn everything they need to learn. And let's not kid ourselves, there are influencers out there selling that. There are
Sure.
people out there telling young people, you don't need school, just watch my YouTube and you're going to learn everything you need to know. And I think in a lot of ways, one of the benefits that I see is that schools can, when they collaborate with local community partners, whether it be big businesses or nonprofits or foundations or government agencies, to create, whether they be small, like micro internships or simulation projects, or even having guest speakers come in, all the way to having paid internships. It allows young people to see how the things that they are learning in school align to the things that exist in the world they're about to go to, the world of work, the world of community engagement, the world of building a better life for your family, your neighbors. And I think we sometimes shy away from that because it's like, we don't want them thinking about work too soon. We don't
Mm.
want them, we need to focus on reading and math. And I think we do need to do those things.
Sure.
But I think there's a way to do that by also recognizing that our young people are scared. They're concerned
Right.
about their future. They don't know what the future is going to look like. They hear all the stuff on the radio and the TV, and it's negative, 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 and like, oh, climate change, and da, da, da. All these things are going to be bad. And it's like, we got to give them something to believe in.
Yep.
And I
Mm.
think one of the things that I've seen in other cities is, and I have not seen a model that works perfectly, but is this notion of, and I don't know if it's city driven as much as it's state driven,
Mm.
where from a policy standpoint, folks decide, oh no, career readiness is really important. Professional development skills readiness is really important. Relationship building, interpersonal skill building, communication building is really important. And we
Mhm.
need to embed that into the curriculum. We need to have standards around it. We need to incentivize schools to help young people develop those talents and skills, ideally in cooperation with the businesses in the region, so that young people are able to have had some experience at what it's going to be like to be a professional, to be an adult, before they actually have to go out and do it. Because at that point, if you're waiting till after the age of 18 to have your first job, which I saw a lot of as a dean at a college,
Sure.
wow, it's a shock to the system for a lot of young people.
And their manager probably too. For both.
Oh, that's a whole nother conversation.
No, I mean, I you share that. I think what I heard you say is like both things can be true, right? Kids in schools can want to learn reading and math. So hey, like let's not neglect what's going to happen after they know how to add and read. Got to get jobs, right? We all got to get jobs and pay taxes. So both can be true at the same time. And I think we'd also argue like the entire education ecosystem hasn't kept up with the pace of innovation as technology, as corporate, as the internet, right? So like the important work you're doing is, I think in one part, kind of nudging the education system to innovate a bit faster, to better support the humans and the students going through that system.
Yeah. And when it happens, it benefits everybody, right?
Sure.
So we've seen with our students, and look, it's still I'm a researcher at heart, so I'm always like, ooh, I don't want to get as excited as everybody else is about our data, but it's really promising because when folks start digging into our data, they're seeing that over 90% of our students are achieving proficiency in these essential professional skills: dependability, interpersonal skills, problem solving. Over 90% of them are saying that they are now more confident in achieving their career goals. And thus far, I know this is not going to last, but it's always like there's going to be a moment where we're doing so well when it comes to social capital building. So every single student who's been through our program has been able to describe a professional relationship they made with someone at their company who they're going to stay connected with after the internship. And we even asked them, how are you going to do it? And they're able to say, okay, I'm staying in touch with them via LinkedIn. I have their email. I'm going to reach out to them in 6 months while I'm in school to sort of let them know how I'm doing. And all of those things are like amazing outcomes. And our goal is to try to keep those outcomes going after, like we start growing. But our schools love those outcomes because it allows them to have a concrete way to deliver on their college and career readiness goals. And like I said before, our employers, they're finding so many benefits of this that we didn't even know when we first started were going to be benefits, particularly around professional development opportunities for their existing staff. So it's like a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I want to, speaking of Prelude, I was doing my best to be a good podcast host and doing some research on the website. I want to read a few sentences around, I think, like part of the reason of the new name, and try not to butcher it, but I thought it was so beautifully written that it was such a good opportunity to say it. So on the website for Prelude, it says, just as a prelude in music sets the stage for what's to come, we prepare young people for the symphony of their careers. We are the opening movement in their professional lives, laying the foundation for a future filled with opportunity and success.
Yeah.
I mean, come write some copy for Shermco if you don't mind. I don't know
if you only knew how long it took me, like, and how many edits, and so like I said, I'm a researcher at heart. I got one of those fancy PhDs, and one of the things that you learn about writing, so I appreciate the kind words. One of the things you learn about writing is, crummy first draft and edit and edit and edit and get feedback and
pushing,
edit and edit. So many people saw different variations of that before it went final. But when it did finally go final, one, I was like, now I can start working on something else. And two, I was like, yeah, that looks pretty good. And it actually sounds really good coming from you. So, I'll be happy to help write some copy for you as long as you're going to be the narrator.
I'll take whatever compliment I can get. That was great. So it was awesome seeing that on the website. Okay, let's get you out here on a few fun and some rapid fire questions. What musical artists are you listening to right now, Dr. Butler?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I wish I could say I listen to a lot of new music. I don't. With the exception of, this is kind of people who hear this and know me are going to be like, really? I didn't know you were into this. I'm really into smooth jazz. And in terms of new music, Richard Elliott's newest album, I think it's called Straight Up and Down, has been regularly on my playlist. But I like to go back to the classics. And over the last month, Shaka Khan, I've been playing through Shaka Khan's discography a great bit, Stevie Wonder's discography, and most recently, because of Chris Malamphy does writes for Slate and has a podcast called Hit Parade, reminded me of how amazing Aretha Franklin is. And literally for the last like 2 weeks, I've just been like all Aretha all the time.
It's great. Beautiful to go back to maybe the classics or maybe just the long time standards.
Yeah.
What is thing our listening audience can do to support Prelude?
Oh, I mean, look, visit joinprelude.org. That's our website. To learn more about our work. We're always excited to identify and work with companies that want to host cohorts of students. Our sweet spot is 10 or more. We find that having at least 10 students in a cohort creates this sort of like magic of peer effects. More than 10 is great, but 10 is like a good starting number. And we've worked with, we're starting to work with companies where it's like, we can do 5 and we can do 5. And so we'll put them together to do 10. So if anybody's in Charlotte or any of our other cities or any city, like we'd love to connect. We love to connect with people who are in corporate social responsibility, HR, talent, to explore, if not partnerships with us, how we do this work. Because even sharing our success stories and how this work happens is going to help build the momentum for that movement I mentioned earlier around galvanizing communities, around helping young people achieve their highest potential, which benefits everybody. It's a win for the students, so visit joinprelude.org. You could learn more about what we do, and then you can reach out to us directly from that website.
And maybe a quick follow-up question. Is it easier for you guys to begin partnerships when corporations and job employers reach out first, or easier when you connect with schools first? Is there a preference?
It's actually easier when a company, corporation, business reaches out first.
Yeah, they have a job.
When I say that easier, I only mean in so many ways. One of the things that we've learned is that for us, it's important that this is a meaningful experience. So it's got to be, so for it to be a high quality work-based learning experience, it's got to be meaningful. And meaning doesn't just mean a company is putting some skin in the game by providing a paid internship. Meaningful means that the student is going to actually be able to get the full learning experience. And it's important for us to be able to engage with a company that is enthusiastic about that. They want to develop the next generation of leaders for their company or for their communities. And if we can get on the same page regarding what are our desired outcomes, both for the students, but more in some ways, I would almost argue more importantly, because businesses are businesses, Greg, right? Like they have business imperatives and needs. If we can help you fill out your business needs, you got this list of 20 things that need to be done, and numbers 15 to 20 never get done, but that's the kind of thing you could allocate some time to a high school intern. Let's help you build that out and scaffold that out. And what are the outcomes? And by the end of the year, what do you want to have achieved? And if we can help you achieve those goals, then we're able to build a sustainable, scalable model with that company and grow more and more student interns. So for us, if we've got an employer in place and we know what it is we need to accomplish with them, it's really easy for us then to go to a school and say, here's the employer, here's what they need, here's the model, here's our supports and how we're going to support you and how we're going to support them. And by the way, the employer is all in on this and they are going to provide the program fee. So all you need to do is provide academic credit for the high school experience, provide a room for the students to do some learning in. If there's going to be a virtual learning experience involved in the process, and have a point person, and you don't have to pay anything out of pocket. In that situation, the schools jump for joy. And then we also have situations where schools are like, this is so good, we will pay for this. But you've got to work with an employer that we have been trying to get to come on board with us. And so then we'll work with the school to say, okay, introduce us to the employer and let's work with that employer to create a great opportunity. So it could go either way, but it's usually a business first.
That's great. I love that. Last question. What does Square Pizza remind you of Dr. Butler?
Fifth grade. Fifth and sixth grade at PS 132, Garrett A. Morgan Elementary School, Washington Avenue. Cafeteria. Thursdays, usually Thursdays. I don't know why it was
Thursdays, not
Thursdays.
Fridays. It wasn't Fridays.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. I think Friday was like, honestly, like peanut butter and jelly. But like,
Man, that's
yeah,
a tough transition to go from Thursday square pizza to Friday
I
PB&J.
think it was like, and
Respectfully to PB&J.
yeah, and we would eat pizza, and we would play this game called snapping. The older generations called it the dozens, where we would like insult each other, and we would have like competitions who was the best at it. Yeah, that's it.
See, we
Yeah.
called it roasting. So it went from dozens to snapping to roasting.
Roasting. I like that. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
We can work on insults back and forth against each other over square pizza. Well, Dr. Butler, thanks for all the work you're doing. Thanks for taking time, and excited for you to be in Charlotte and the great work you're doing in Charlotte and also across the country.
And Greg, thanks for the great work that you do and that your team does at Shermco, and for what you're all doing to make Charlotte this amazing place for education and employment pathway growth. Like, I'm so excited about Charlotte. So thanks for having me on. And yeah, looking forward to our future conversations on the air or off the air.
That's right. It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for checking out the Square Pizza Pod, making a few selfish requests. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps spread the word about the podcast, and share this with a friend. We appreciate it. Thanks.